Good evening, good evening, good evening, and welcome to Couch Conversations with the Doctors, where health is wealth. What night is it tonight? It is Monday night, and it is time for Couch Conversations with the Doctors. So, just want to remind you guys to share, and share again. Tell all of your friends that it is Monday night, and the panel is here, ready to have a discussion. We're going to start with the man who says that I threaten him to be here every Monday night, but he tends to always be on time. That's our very own Dr. James Miller. Dr. Miller.
Hey, hello everybody. So glad to be able to be here tonight and thank Congressman Davis and Nikki for providing this platform so that we can discuss issues and concerns of our community, especially those that are involving healthcare, since most of us in one way or another are still or have been connected with providing healthcare. So I'm glad to be here. I'm a retired internist. I retired in 2019, but I'm still interested in healing our community.
Outstanding, and thank you so very much. Well, to my colleague who tends to go and have fun in the sun, but we just got past daylight savings. That's our very own Douglas Graham. Well, we sprung forward because it's spring. Hey, Doug.
Hey, thank you, Nikki. I'm just trying to achieve work-life balance. That's all. Like Dr. Miller, I retired in 2019, and after that, I went
Doug,
to
are
work.
you?
Can you hear me? Okay. And after I retired, I spent 2 years working with the
Yes.
congressman in Washington, D.C. in his office. And it really opened my eyes to public health and public service. It's really an honor to be on this forum to work with my colleagues, and we're going to try and answer your questions as best we can.
Outstanding. Well, to that person who is known as Dr. 100 on these streets, the one who keeps it 100 with all her patients, she keeps it really real. That's our very own Dr. Maya Green. Dr. Green?
Good evening. Thank you, Congressman. Thank you, Nikki, for hosting this, starting this. Again, I said you started this at a time when we needed it. The community needed a place to come, fellowship, learn from and with each other, and for different reasons. But we're at that place now, so I'm honored to be part of the discussion. Thank you for having me.
Outstanding, and thank you so much. Well, to that world-renowned urologist who hates accolades, but he keeps us all together. So my question is there a doctor in the house? Our very own Dr. Terry Mason. Dr. Mason, why don't you introduce yourself to everyone?
Yes, thank you so much, Nikki, and I appreciate this opportunity. And I am honored to share this platform with my colleagues, and I'm grateful to be able to be over years of being in practice as a urologist that I have some things that I've learned beyond just about urology that impact our people's availability to avail themselves of those services to help them heal themselves. So we're going to add more about that tonight.
Outstanding, and thank you so very much. Well, to the man who makes it possible for us each and every Monday night, to the one who teaches us that true health is wealth, that's our very own Congressman of the Illinois 7th Congressional District, Congressman Danny K. Davis. Congressman?
Well, thank you all very much. As a matter of fact, I didn't see Joe Harrington, but my first meeting today was with Joe and a group of other people, one of whom was Dr. Shafdeen Amuwa, who used to be the associate dean of the School of Public Health at the University of Illinois. And we just had ourselves a wonderful, wonderful time reminiscing and discussing and talking about some of the many health things. One great area of community action in Chicago, for those who know anything about the health history, is that it's been a very vibrant, active, activated bunch of people who have brought health to the point of where we are. And they're just things to know. For example, I was looking over some papers, and The Mile Square Health Center, for example, was the largest, best funded, all the community health centers in the nation between California and New York. That and being in the middle of the country, uh, it just spawned doctors, nurses, uh, practitioners of all different kinds. And I was thinking of some of the great training activity that we used to have. We had a program at the University of Michigan at Ann Arbor, which was considered at that time, probably still is, the best public health uh, program, training program, educational program in the nation, where individuals could go and end up with a master's degree in public health. And Eugene Feingold, who was the dean, was considered one of the top public health guys in the world, in the nation. But if you were in the nation and you was in the United States, that also meant you was in the world. And we had another program at the University of California where individuals could end up getting a master's degree in health administration. And they would go it for 6 weeks at a time in a concentrated program, come back, and all of this was funded by the federal government. And of course, the federal government, rather than doing those kind of things now, is talking about we're spending too much money on government and we shouldn't be doing it. And much of that has to do with the difference in philosophical thinking that people have relative to the purpose of government and why governments exist and why governments are created and what they are intended to do. And there are those who believe that government should simply be the policeman of society. That is, set the rules. And if you play by the rules, you do all right. And if you don't play by the rules, you'll do all wrong. but but healthcare is something that everybody needs. You can't do without it. It affects you one way or the other. And of course, tomorrow is sort of a national Medicaid Action Day because no matter how you cut it, Frederick Douglass was right when he said he knew one thing if he didn't know anything else. And that is, in this world, you may not get everything that you pay for, but you will pay for everything that you get. And if you don't pay one way, you will pay another way. And so if you don't pay for the care, you will die before you intended to. And that's another price that you have to pay. So thanks to all. We look forward to a fruitful discussion. And I can't thank you enough for joining.
Outstanding. I want to say hey to Virginia Knight, who is here. She says good evening to everyone. To Angela Underwood, who is here. She says good evening to all and thank you for what you do. Tyrene Newkirk is here and she says good evening, everyone. Great to see you, doctors, and night's conversation. Well, Sister Bonnie is here as well, and she says good evening to everyone and thank you for helping us be better with our health. Linda Johnson is here, and Linda Johnson says good evening to everyone who is here with us on today. I want to say hey to Matt Hawkins, who is here with us, to Kathy Woods, who's here, Arlene Spencer, who is here, Latrice Good is here with us just as well, and Phyllis Murray is here also. I want to say hello to all of those who are here. Dorothy Murphy is here and she says hello to, I want to say hey to Sherry Scott, who is here with us just as well. She's saying hello and thank you. Well, oops, sorry. Well, now we're ready to get moving. Well, Dr. Mason, you said you were going to kick us off so we could begin the conversation.
Well, thank you so much, and I feel honored to do so with such esteemed colleagues. But I'd like us to be thinking a bit more about, rather than the manifestation of the disease that we always talk about, we're going to talk about colorectal cancer. We need to talk about the steps that it takes, that these diseases just don't pop up all at one time. And for my internal medicine colleagues on the panel, there are things that we can do, and some of them are in the realm of early detection, and other of them are in the realm of management and prevention as best as we know. Well, one of the things I will leave as something that we as physicians, and unfortunately, we as physicians are not appropriately trained in nutrition and the role that food plays in our disease processes and our health. And what I might mean by that is that, yes, we learn all about the different medicines that we need to use to manage disease, but we're really not taught about those things, including the things that we eat on a very low level, what we can do to help prevent these diseases. And so I'll leave it there, and I'll allow and ask my colleagues to put some meat on the bones of those statements that I've just made.
I'll go ahead and jump in with this, Dr. Mason. And one of the things that I've had some conversation over the past couple of weeks with people that are practicing medicine now, just talking, as I've had conversation about things that are changing in view of the cuts and things that we're seeing, and talking about what is needed to make certain that we can provide the care that people in our community need. And so one of the things that seem to keep be coming up a lot, not just in those conversations, but as I read articles, articles about where can I find a doctor, where are the doctors, and so one of the things that seem to be coming up is that there seem to be a deficient, not enough primary care doctors, not enough. And so you got to be able to feel that need, as you said, that we're talking about doing preventative care. You got to have people there to do that in order to get that done. So we go to step one. Step one is having the providers available so that now they can do what need to be done, deliver the care that need to be delivered, and go ahead and do what's appropriate to prevent people from getting sick. So what I'm saying is that I think we as long as I can actually remember, since I've been in health, we've been talking about a physician deficit in America, and but today we're seeing that, especially I think in primary care, because I looked at it, and one of the discussion I had was talking about doctors who are specializing in internal medicine now. There are less of them that are involved in the outpatient care for patient, whereas they used to be make up that part of that role of the primary care doctor. So now that shrinks the number of people that's available. I know that we're making some of these things up with nurse practitioners and physician assistants, but I think that we need to begin to look um, at what will produce the best kind of care, what will do, what happens to help us to have the best leadership in the healthcare industry. And so I think that we need to get back to understanding that we got to push more to get more people interested in doing and being a healthcare provider, and then making certain that we support them, that we mentor them, and that we can get them to the point that they can now be effective primary care providers, because there seemed to be a deficiency of doctors that in that area to provide that care.
Dr. Maya?
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble with my lighting today, y'all. But not only that, it puts a strain on the system as a whole because my internet went out. So I don't know if you all mentioned this, but it's a cycle, right? Chronic things that we could catch with primary and secondary prevention. That's usually caught in the primary care office, right? That's usually caught at your annual wellness. That's usually caught when you go there. And so, say these things don't get caught, and then let's talk high blood pressure. One of the silent killer. Say I'm not going to my twice a year, once a year, checkups and getting my blood pressure taken. So I got high blood pressure, and it's unchecked because I'm not going. I don't know, in a lot of communities, there's food apartheid. And so I'm eating everything that's around me, which is not necessarily something nutritious. And then I have an end stage result because I didn't get the primary prevention, which would be the screening. When you go to the doctor, they take your blood pressure. And then they tell you, like, hey, your blood pressure is this. That's a good blood pressure. That education, you want to watch for this. Also, primary prevention for high blood pressure. An example is when my doctor takes my history and they start asking me about my family. And they say, oh, your mom and dad had high blood pressure? Okay, well, here's the plan for you. That's primary prevention. I don't have high blood pressure yet. My doctor that I trust is helping me to make sure I never move into the space of high blood pressure, right? Secondary prevention, I get screened and my blood pressure is high. They say, okay, we're going to go on low salt. We're going to go exercise. We're going to do these things. I need you to come back. We screen again. If I'm okay, then I'm managing with nutrition and activity. If my blood pressure is still high on the follow-up, then we're talking about medications and other strategies, right? Secondary prevention, right? So our primary care clinics keep us in the primary and secondary prevention range because what happens? Say none of that happens, and one day I just have problems seeing, or one day I just feel really sick because my kidney failed, or one day I have a stroke, or one day I have a heart attack. These are all what we call sequelae, but long-term effects of elevated blood pressure unchecked, right? Where do I go? I go to the emergency room. I go to the hospital. Now the cost of it is higher than my annual visit with my doctor, right? Now I'm getting, and it's a higher cost, not only on, financially, but it's a higher cost to my quality of life, trying to recover after a stroke. Nobody talks about the depression that people get about 6 weeks after they've had the heart surgery. After your chest has been opened up, is well studied that person then goes into depression about 6 weeks after. Nobody talks about the downtime where I'm having trouble working, depending on how much my recovery is. No, there's a cost, sure, to the budget, but there's a cost to my quality of life, my mind, body, spirit wellness that happens when I don't go and I don't have access to that once a year, once or twice a year visit where I'm gonna ask you, did you get the flu shot? You're gonna give me the speech how you don't get the flu shot, blah, blah, blah. I'm gonna take your blood pressure and I'm gonna say all the things you're gonna say, I know. And I'm gonna, talk about smoking. The studies say it's 5 to 14 times we gotta say, hey, smoking may not be good for you before somebody considers stopping. That's secondary prevention. That's secondary prevention, me saying it. Me saying don't smoke is the primary. So primary and secondary prevention happens all around you in the office with the doctor you trust. And it helps you not to put a burden on yourself to yourself for decreased quality of life.
Doug, I'm gonna
Outstanding.
ask
Want to
you
say hey to Dorothy Murphy. Dorothy Murphy, in case we didn't say hello to you, want to say hey. Want to say hey to the core center who is here. They are working, but they say I keep forgetting them a little bit, and I apologize, core center. But the core center is here, and they are watching and paying great close attention, and they are rooting us on, and they shot us some questions over just as well. Audrey Jaycox is here. I want to say good evening to Audrey Jaycox. She says good evening to everyone. Connie Taylor is here, and good evening. She says good evening to everyone. Revy is here. Hey, Revy. And Revy says good evening just as well. Alderman Pat Dow is here, and she says good evening. And so is President Carrie Steele. Hey, Carrie, how are you? Well, Dr. Mason, I think you were saying something.
Yeah, I just wanted to add as we continue the conversation. One of the things that I'd like to talk about is this over reliance on symptoms. Because what we do know is that there are no symptoms usually available or present at the earliest possible stage of of a disease. There's usually not any real significant symptoms very early in a cancer, very early in a high blood pressure, very early in many things, even cancers like colorectal cancer or lung cancer. So we have been, even though we talk about symptoms, I'd like to ask, since I'm going to be doing my little slight moderating here, I'm going to ask Doug, and then others can uh, fall in line on this whole notion on symptoms and the reality of what they tell us or not.
So I think that's a great question. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to segue into last week's section and talk about pancreatic cancer first and colorectal cancer second. The pancreas is an organ that kind of lives right at the very base of your rib cage, but it's buried and it's on top of your spinal cord. And it's kind of in a hidden place where it doesn't develop symptoms that you can feel until it's very widespread. So that's one of the problems about waiting until you have symptoms, because it might be too late. Colorectal cancer is somewhat similar. It's a long tube that goes from one side of the pelvis to the other. And most of the time, you can't feel what's going on because it doesn't cause pain. It doesn't really cause very many symptoms until it's very far advanced. Another really troublesome problem that I want to agree with Dr. Mason is we can't always tell if a symptom is related to the disease or something else. There are a whole lot of things that cause tiredness or fatigue. There are a whole lot of things that may cause joint or muscle pain, a whole bunch of other diseases. So just because you have it doesn't necessarily mean that you know exactly what's going on. And so what Dr. Mason is really talking about is that early detection really helps because it's easier to take care of a problem. Like if you got a leak in your basement, you want to know when the first cup of water is filled on the floor. You don't want to get there when there's a bathtub of water on the floor. And if you don't have a leak detector out there, you may discover it too late. So that's what really Dr. Miller is trying to tell you is you need to have somebody who knows how to begin their early detection system for all these problems, because high blood pressure has no symptoms. Kidney disease doesn't have any symptoms. Heart disease, unless it's really far advanced, really doesn't have any symptoms. Lung disease, by the time you get to be short of breath, you're in really big trouble. You want that detected long before you start getting short of breath. So what we're really saying is the earlier you find it, there's more that you can do for it, and the easier it is to restore your health. I mean, think about this. If you have to remodel every room in a house, how long that takes, as opposed to just having to remodel one bathroom. It's a completely different kettle of fish. Your life is much less disrupted the earlier you begin, and the better your results can be. So, Dr. Mason, does that kind of help answer your question?
Yes, because we put so much stock in the presence or absence of symptoms, and there are times symptoms are very important. But I wanted to bring that out and allow all of you to have a conversation about these symptoms. And one of the ones that we always talk about is high blood pressure.
Yeah.
Or perhaps some of those other related, what we call cardiovascular diseases. So I'm going to back off and Dr. Maya and others and Dr. Miles, I'm sorry, Dr. Jane Miller, please go right ahead because this is, I hear this all the time.
So I want to say hey to Nana Teresa, who's here. She says, good evening to everyone. Tina Hammond is here just as well, and she's doing that call out to everyone that's here. Well, Dr. Miller, I have a question for you. We have a question from an anonymous viewer who says, Dr. Miller, thank you for making the statement about seeing doctors in our communities. Our communities don't have late night hours, which is a problem for some of us who do work and our schedules aren't feasible for the doctor's visits, nor do we really get a lot of time to get off to go to the doctor. So having a late night or a late evening visit will be best for us. Now, I know this is kind of lengthy, and Nikki, thank you for reading, no problem. However, we know what colorectal screening is, but is there screening for pancreatic cancer? And do the doctors in our community have those type of conversations? I know Nikki told me that the one doctor, 100, can be seen over at task force, but how do we even get there?
Yeah. Well, yeah. So when we talk about pancreatic cancer, there are tests that can be done to detect pancreatic cancer, but for the most part, pancreatic cancer is a type of cancer because of the way the position of the pancreas as well as the surrounding structure, how it fits in there, is very often difficult to detect by simple things like X-rays. We can't see it that way. Sometimes if it's big enough, you may be able to see it with an ultrasound or a CAT scan or an MRI. So when we're talking about that, so we as I go up, you talk about X-ray, a very for the most part inexpensive type of testing, up to an MRI, which is a very expensive kind of testing, at least in our community or in our country, I should say. So so when tests get to be very very expensive, the ability to get them done and pay for them becomes an issue, and whether we like this or not. Congressman Davis said that one of the saying of Booker T. Washington is that you're not going to get anything without paying for it, but everything that you get, you got to pay for it. So so if you got to pay for it, then funding money got to be available. And so as you sort of hit on this whole issue that we're having now, when you cut the funds, you cut the availability or the ability to get things that cost money. And so yes, there could be maybe a testing that done. The fact is that oftentimes, at least in my experience, when I uh, discovered a person had pancreatic cancer before it had become very advanced, most of the time I was looking for something else. And then it just happened that I was looking in that area, but was looking for a different process, a different problem, and it showed up. So this is a disease that is very slow to show any symptoms. So most of the time, you're not going to have symptoms until the disease itself is far advanced. And when disease is far advanced, the ability to cure it is very minimum. That's one of the problems. And I think the other part of the problem, to get back to what I was talking about at the beginning of the conversation, is that we have to have physicians available to see patients, because we're in this society where everybody is waiting to have a symptom before they go see a doctor. And as being said, most of these diseases don't have symptoms early. So if you wait and count on being able to utilize symptoms as a way to detect the disease, the chances are that you're not going to catch any disease in its early stages, and that means that's a bad thing. If you happen to have, let's say you had high blood pressure, diabetes, and you're getting kidney disease, the symptoms of kidney disease are probably not going to be there, until the disease is late and you're beyond the point that you probably at the point just about that you're probably going to need some significant intervention. And so that time that you could have been there when it was detectable would have been when you were having your routine health exam during the year. Testing could have been done and to detect an early problem. So we need to so one, we do need to have people available, because one of the things that patients always say, I want to see the doctor but I can't get an appointment, or it takes me 3 months to get an appointment. And so these are things that deter people from being compliant, when they have difficulty getting an appointment to see a doctor. And it's not the fault of the patient nor of the doctor. Sometimes it's the load that he is carrying, the number of people that he's responsible for caring for is more than he has allotted time for. And so, as we've sort of gotten into this point in time where people need to see a doctor, but there's no doctor available, or people need to see a doctor and the doctor just doesn't have the time to spend with them and be able to do the job as thoroughly as possible. Because the thing is that most people, they'll give you what they know, but you got to be able to put things together and make certain that you do the necessary screening and the necessary preventative measures and detection. Use whatever measure of detection that you can to find out if there's something going on that at an early, especially if you want to find it at an early stage where it's possibly curable or reversible. And so that's those are the issues that we often are affected by not being able to find it timely for multiple reasons, but oftentimes because people just don't get in to see a doctor early enough.
Well, Dr. Miller, you almost just broke the internet, because when you said it's hard to get an appointment, we literally got 3,208 people who start saying yes and pushing the button at the same time. I could barely keep up. And people start spurting out. Linda Johnson, yes. Tammy, yes, that is so true. Tina Hammond has a question, though. And Tina, I'm going to come right back to your question. Laura Leon says, good evening to everybody. Nellie Purnell is here. She says, good evening. And there's a plethora of people who are sending up the clapping hands and the thumbs saying that they cannot get an appointment to see a doctor. We got you. We got you. Well, Tina Hammond has a question. She says, is pancreatic cancer hereditary? My mother died from it in 2020. Hey, Rosie. Rosie Watson is here just as well. So Tina wants to know, is it hereditary? I see Doug has unmuted, and Maya, don't forget the question they had you about over there at Task Force. We're going to get right back to you. Go right ahead, Doug.
So I would guess, and I think it's probably a reasonable guess, that there's more than one form of pancreatic cancer. And some of those forms are genetically related. And they occur in groups. And so my advice would be to see a gastroenterologist, let him take a history, let him do the appropriate test to put your mind at ease.
And Ashley says, Congressman Davis, you are amazing. Thank you so much. I learned so much, and I get the opportunity to ask a doctor a question. And I have one. Dr. Miller or Dr. Monet, my A1C3 was once 9. It is now down to 6.1. Can I get pancreatic cancer by being a diabetic?
Okay, go ahead, Dr. Miller.
So yeah, having diabetes is a risk factor for pancreatic cancer. Now, you can get people that don't have diabetes also do get pancreatic cancer, as Dr. Graham has stated earlier, that there are probably multiple forms of pancreatic cancer, but when diabetes is a disease that is related to inflammatory problems in the pancreas, and cancer can also be a disease that developed from having inflammatory and abnormal changes that are occurring in the pancreas. So there may be some relationship to to certain diabetes and certain types of pancreatic cancer.
Maya?
So yes, especially type 2 diabetes can lead to it. And for some people it's what comes first, the chicken or the egg, right? The onset of diabetes, type 2 diabetes, is good to go, stay in care, things like that. um, in the event, but usually pancreatic cancer, you'll have other stuff like yellowing of your eyes, inability to tolerate food, rapid weight loss, that type of thing going on. And then all of a sudden, you get this diabetes as part of the development, the destruction of the cells of the pancreas, not necessarily a hereditary onset or hereditary predisposition to diabetes. So acute onset or fast onset diabetes is sometimes a result of pancreatic cancer, but diabetes type 2, adult onset diabetes, which happens a lot slower than acute onset, it can be in some rare cases associated with diabetes type 1, not so much. Nikki, I was going to say something about the question right before that, and now the question left my head. Dr. Graham, I think
Which
you
question is
commented.
it?
Oh, yes. There are several different types of pancreatic cancers. One of them, the ductal kind, is the most common kind. The rest of them, I will try to get to you before the end of this session here. I don't recall them off the top of my head, but you're absolutely right, Dr. Graham and Dr. Miller. There are several different types of pancreatic cancers, and several of them are associated with the rapid onset and the rapid movement for a couple of reasons. Some of them have what we call aggressive tumor growth, which is it starts, it goes, it starts, it goes, it starts, it goes, just like that. And then pancreatic cancer itself, the pancreas, because I'm using this film and I'm not having good lighting today. I'm trying to see my hands. The pancreas has a high, so the pancreas has a higher incidence than other organs of start, grow, start, grow, start, grow. But in that start, grow, it breaks off, or what we call metastasizes and moves a lot faster. Sometimes they say, oh, we discovered a cancer. Let's look. Let's make sure we can picture or draw out all the borders, frames, or we call them margins of the cancer. Make sure we got it all out. Well, pancreatic cancer, it pinches off faster than the other one. So a lot of times when you, if you all have loved ones who have experienced cancers of other organs, you may hear the doctor say, okay, well, we'll schedule it for next week. We'll schedule it for 2 weeks from now. Make sure we got out all the margins. When pancreatic cancer, people are like, whoa, let's get it before it kind of pinches off, right? And then when it comes to treatment of pancreatic cancer, a lot of times the pancreas won't listen, or what we call will be resistant resistance to it. Now, if you do have a family member who has been living with cancer, pancreatic cancer, or experienced it, you do go to your doctor, you do tell them that you do push for that scan. You do push for that screening in that case. There's no guideline that says everybody needs to be screened. But just like Dr. Mason was saying, Dr. Miller was saying, if you already know kind of the predisposition, don't wait till you have a symptom. Push and advocate for yourself now.
Outstanding. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to, one of the other things that I just wanted to mention, that constantly in our bodies, we're having cancer or precancerous cells. Now, our body is made such that it destroys many of them, but obviously over time, all of them may not be destroyed. So what I'm saying is that when we have this process that cancerous cells are developing, and now most of these cells are not unhealthy cells, so they don't have the same survivability, but sometimes they can survive. So what I'm saying is that when we have that going on in our body, that tells us that we need to have some kind of constant monitoring to make certain that there is no conglomeration or growth and development of these cancerous cells that are there. we like I said, they do occur in all of our bodies and all the different parts. But for the most part, our immune system is able to detect and destroy most of them. And we must be able to research and to search and see if there's some that survives, and at an earlier stage when we can do something to rid ourselves of them.
So Rosie says agreed. Yolanda Williams says good evening to all. And Tyron in Newkirk says she has a question. And her question is, one question I have is regarding how we can improve access to life-saving medications like hypertension medication and insulin. I have been receiving reports from community members and know from personal experience that there has been a shortage of these medications at pharmacies on the West Side. What can we do as a community to get a better access to medications?
That is a great, great question. I think that this has to be addressed at a state level. The people who are controlling patients' access to medications are called pharmacy benefits managers. They're the ones who negotiate for the manufacturers the prices and then negotiate the prices and the delivery to the individual pharmacies. And I think there's an overwhelming wealth of information that was a well-intended idea has not turned out so well for the end user at all. We have a very, very profound lack of alignment between the pharmacy benefits manager's job and the needs of the community and the patients. We are not offered products that are the most effective. We're not offered the products that have the easiest utilization. We're not offered the products that may be the best suited for the circumstances. And I think that issue needs to be addressed. Most states have had some success at the state level. I know that there have been several bills in front of the Senate. However, because of the power of the lobbyists in Washington, D.C., it's very difficult to have these bills passed. On a realistic level, I think we're going to have to start pooling information from all of the nearby pharmacies, because you may have to travel to obtain that particular medication or product because one pharmacy may not have a delivery or may have it in real time, which means more work for the patient or the provider. But I don't have any other alternative until we change the way that we design our formularies and finance our formularies.
Thanks, Doug. That was so important. One of the things I'd like to ask or throw out for the internal medicine and primary care docs on the panel is there's this notion, I've been having a lot of people talk about all these dialysis units in the Black community, all these little things that people go and get dialysis. Well, let me tell you, they're there because people use them. And they're there because people make money from using or having these machines being used. Now, I'm not saying it's all about money, because the reason they're there is because many people my internal medicine colleagues can talk about this better than I can, but the combination of being diabetic and having high blood pressure really does not work well with keeping your kidneys healthy. It really helps to create the small filtering cells in the kidney. It damages them. And when that happens, and I'll leave that up to my colleagues in internal medicine to discuss even further, and that doesn't hurt. You don't get any pain. You don't necessarily get any bleeding as a result of it, but you are already having significant damage to the filtering system that we call the kidneys. And without pain, without any of those things, and I'm not saying those machines should not be there because they need to be, but the two things I will say is that the combination of high fructose corn syrup is a deadly combination for people who are already hypertensive and have some degree of early kidney disease. And we need to, and that's why it's important. And again, I'll stop right there because I'm really like the way that the internists are really primary care doctors talking about this, because this pain that's actually, think of it like this, that your kidney is like a screen door. And the screen door is in your house to keep certain things in and certain things out. But in the screen door starts getting bigger holes in it, then things that shouldn't be coming in the house are coming out, or things that shouldn't be going out shouldn't be going out. And what happens is the kidneys, when they lose their ability to filter, then you end up what's called kidney failure, and you end up on having a seat on some of those machines in our community. So I'll stop with that as an overview, and please and ask my colleagues to fill in the blanks.
Well, Dr. Mason, before you stop, the Core Center says, don't stop. Give an example of high fructose corn syrup because our community misses that. And I'm going to get the rest of your questions as well. I see you. Hey, Pamela Dominguez, she's here. She says, good evening. Sean Kennedy is here. Hey, Sean, how you doing? And Tarina, I'm going to get to your questions. But Dr. Mason, the Core Center says, give an example of high fructose corn syrup so people will know exactly what we're talking about.
It is used as the predominant sweetener for almost everything, from soda pop to Kool-Aid to anything that you get sweetened out from the store. For the most part, it is sweetened with high fructose corn syrup. High fructose corn syrup is a chemical. It is not natural. It is a chemical that is made from the corn syrup, but it is far, far more, I'll call it more diabetogenic, and I'll leave that to my colleagues. In other words, this particular high sugar syrup that is used to sweeten almost everything, including bread. They put it in everything. And the high fructose corn syrup and all of our candy bars and all of those things that we love to eat. And according to Dr. Robert Lustig, who is a pediatric endocrinologist in California, he talks about that high fructose corn syrup has the same potential for becoming addicted as does cocaine. That it stimulates the same circles in the brain as cocaine. And when we get to the point where we say, well, I got to have this candy bar, or I got to have this pop, or I got to have this sweet drink, or I got to have it, you really do have to have it because you are now addicted to the high fructose corn syrup that is in many of those things. And I'll let I ask my other colleagues to please comment.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to when I was young and first starting in practice, and would encounter patients who would come and talk to me about, we would talk about their diet or food substances that they were consuming, and usually we get around at some point in time talking about the sweet drinks, and even I would sometimes have people who would want to get off of the drink, and back when some of the earlier training where we talked about stuff like caffeine, wasn't talking so much about the sugars, and that people might be addicted to the caffeine in the coffee, caffeines in some of the caffeine containing sodas. But the real deal was it wasn't the caffeine; it was the sugar that the individuals were addicted to, and the reason why they often were not able to just quit them, at will. And it's the sugar that also does damage to your body. So, I like the way that Dr. Mason explained to you about the purpose of the kidney. And I mean, I'm sure hopefully that'll make sense to everybody that you need to have something to keep the good stuff on the right side and the bad stuff on the side that it need to be on. So the kidney has the ability to get stuff out of the body that the body no longer need or don't need as much of, and to maintain the stuff that we need to carry on. And when it is damaged, like anything, when it's damaged, it cannot function as efficiently as when it is not damaged. And then it has to do with the amount of damage. So you start off with a little damage, it can counter function, but it still have a problem. But as that damage increases, then it gets to the point that it can no longer keep things where it should be in terms of what it works with. And so now we get to the point that now we have to have some other kinds of mechanism, which is your dialysis machine, or get new kidneys in order to be able to keep the body being able to function in a normal way. Because these things that we're talking about, they're not just little things. They have to do with your electrolytes. They have to do with so many things that are so important in the functions of various organ systems within your body. And when they can't function right, or when they don't have the ingredients to function right, everything goes awry. And so that's the status that we can find ourselves in when our kidneys fail us.
I just want to add that you don't get any pain from that.
No.
When your kidneys are failing, you don't feel anything. And the one thing I always try and do an analogy to is, those of you who remember, when I grew up, we used to have a screen door on the front and on the back door. And the screen was there so that it would let the air in or out, but keep the mosquitoes and everything else out. And so what happens when you start getting diabetes and high blood pressure, it's like somebody, when your heart is beating and trying to push the blood out, that hits those screens. It hits that screen. And if your pressure is high, it hits it harder. And then what happens is, pretty soon that unit that's supposed to be filtering stuff doesn't work anymore, and it's actually damaged, and there's holes. And then what happens is the stuff that shouldn't be coming out is coming out. And the stuff that should be staying in isn't being able to stay in because the filter is broken. It's just like, now you got holes in your filter at your house, and now the mosquitoes and if they get bad enough, you'll have all other kind of things crawling in because the screen is damaged. And so that's all. When you're seeing people sitting on those chairs getting dialyzed, is because their filter, their kidney isn't working. And so they're sitting there with an artificial kidney, and the blood has to go through that artificial filter to be filtered, because now the kidney, because of what we've been doing, is now not functioning in the way it should.
I wanted to add one more thing to what Dr. Mason has said. This high fructose corn syrup is not an accident. It was very, very thoroughly and deliberately studied. And so that's why it's an ingredient, because they know its addictive properties. The same thing about all the salty, crunchy snacks you see. Every Frito, every Dorito, every potato chip, they've studied that very, very carefully to know how to appeal to you so that you want it over and over and over again. This isn't for your health's best interest. It's for somebody else's financial best interest. So as you reach for that Coca-Cola or you reach for that bag of Doritos, ask yourself, do I want to enrich them, or do I want to enrich myself and my family? You will always have that choice.
Outstanding. Well, I know you guys hate when I say this, but it's our time. So we're going to go around really quickly doing our Until Next Mondays. And I did not forget your questions. I promise we'll get to those questions next week. We'll make sure that your questions are the priorities. They'll be the first questions we answer right before we start our next week's conversation. Well, Dr. Green, that's Dr. 100, Dr. Maya, that is, her Until Next Monday says, continue to advocate for health. Ask for your screenings and everything you need for primary and, if needed, secondary prevention and diseases. Well, Dr. Miller, you're Until Next Monday.
Well, I'm just going to really sort of highlight or push a little bit more in terms of what we started out with. What I started out with is that, during these times when we are facing cuts and possible not having enough finances to take care of the health care that's needed, we are going to have to be more vigilant. We're going to have to be more demanding because the system was already strained, and now there's additional strain on the system because it may not have all the money that needed, and so remember, the slogan of this Monday this program is health is wealth. Now, so what I'm saying here, your health is probably the most important thing that you have. You can, and if you lose it, you're gonna have a difficult time trying to rebuy it. So don't lose it. Don't lose your health. Keep it well. Keep it going.
Wow, that is powerful. Well, I gotta read Ashley's comment because it's hilarious. Ashley said, "Oh my Lord, not the Pepsi." Well, Doug, you're until next Monday.
So I think someone asked a very important question about medications in the community. I have a second answer for them, and that is get to know your local pharmacist. We're now going to be experiencing not just food deserts, but pharmacy deserts as well. Walgreens has been sold to private equity. That will not be a good thing for healthcare. Longs and CVS are also closing down their stores. You want to get to know your local pharmacist because they can be very, very helpful. They can do inventory searches, they can suggest alternative medications. So if you can engage them, become friends with them, they will be delighted to help you find out where you can find some of the medications you're looking for. Their store may not have it, but another store might, and they can suggest alternative medications. That's what they're trained to do. So they're a person, you can talk to them person to person. That might be of help to you.
Well, Karen says next week, can we also add in the fact that some of our prescriptions have become so overpriced that we can't even afford them?
Yeah.
Dr. Mason, you're until next Monday.
My tell next Monday is to continue talking about the stuff I've been talking about all the time. Because at the end of the day, we've got to do a better job of making selections about the things we put in our mouths, whether we chew them or whether we swallow them, drink them, but we've got to make better choices. And unfortunately, our industry isn't really set around us making better choices. They want us to make the choices they want. So we'll talk more about that at another time. But thank you all for listening, and I'm grateful for the time that we had to share.
Outstanding. Well, for those of you who have been sending messages, where's Dr. Hampton? Let's just keep him in our prayers and hope that he can get back here with us by next week or week after. Let's just keep his whole family in our prayers right now at this time. Tina Hammond says, Lord Jesus, help us. And Congressman, with that being said, take us home. You're muted.
But I think my takeaway is early screening and detection is very important. That if, in order to be preventive, you got to know what's going on. And so oftentimes I'm told that sometimes when physicians are looking for one thing, and I think Dr. Miller emphasized it, that they often find something else. I have been to a lot of funerals in the last few weeks. Well, I go to a lot of them anyway, all the time, pretty much anyway. And I'm just recalling that some of the individuals, by the time they discovered what their illness was, it was a little too late to head it off. That didn't take a long time afterwards for them to be gone. And I guess had they gone earlier, then maybe they would have caught it in time for the treatment to work or to reverse it. So I want to thank especially Dr. Miller for giving me that bit of information that reinforces how important it is just to have these regular visits and how to go and why to go. And so if we do that, then in all likelihood, we will prolong our own being. And that will help us be able to keep doing whatever it is that we do. So thank all of you gentlemen and ladies for a very insightful evening. And until next Monday, I hope to see you all next Monday. Have a good night.
Good night, Congressman.
All right. Yeah.